Arizona Territory, 1885. The August sun burned mercilessly over Copper Creek as Heath Turner wiped sweat from his brow, squinting at the horizon where a lone figure approached on horseback. Something about the rider's silhouette struck him as familiar yet foreign. The straight-backed posture, the deliberate way they handled the reins. He paused in repairing the corral fence, hammer suspended mid-swing. "Someone coming," he called over his shoulder to no one in particular, his voice echoing across the ranch yard. At 26, Heath had grown into the land his father had claimed 15 years earlier. His shoulders had broadened with the labor of cattle driving and fence mending, his skin bronzed by constant exposure to the southwestern sun. Light brown hair, typically hidden beneath his wide-brimmed hat, curled slightly at his collar, and a shadow of stubble darkened his jawline. Despite the harsh demands of ranch life, a certain gentleness remained in his blue eyes, a quality his mother had always insisted made him special. The rider drew closer, revealing itself to be a woman. She rode astride rather than side saddle, wearing a simple dark blue riding skirt and white blouse, practical frontier clothing that nonetheless couldn't disguise her grace. A long braid of raven black hair hung over her shoulder, catching the sunlight as she approached the gate. Heath set down his hammer, curiosity overtaking his need to finish the repairs. Something in her bearing stirred a memory he couldn't quite place. The woman halted her horse just beyond the gate. Up close, her features were striking. High cheekbones, copper skin weathered by sun and wind, and dark eyes that regarded him with an intensity that made him pause. She appeared to be in her early 20s, though there was a worldliness about her that suggested she'd seen more than most women her age. "Heath Turner?" Her voice was steady, confident, with just the slightest accent he couldn't identify. He nodded, removing his hat as his mother had taught him when addressing a lady. "That's me. Something I can help you with, miss?" The woman's lips curved into a small smile, her dark eyes studying his face as though searching for something. "You don't remember me." It wasn't a question but a statement, tinged with what might have been disappointment. Heath studied her more carefully. There was something hauntingly familiar about those eyes, but he couldn't place them. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Have we met before?" She dismounted in one fluid motion, displaying a comfort with horses that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. Standing before him, she was tall for a woman, her presence commanding despite her slender frame. "My name is Fawn Proudfoot." She paused, watching his face for any flicker of recognition. When none came, she continued, 10 years ago, you found a half-starved Apache girl hiding in your father's barn. You brought her food for 3 days before the cavalry came through." Heath's hammer slipped from his fingers, hitting the dust with a dull thud. The memory crashed through him, a terrified child with wild eyes, crouching in the hay loft, flinching at his approach until hunger had overcome fear. He'd been 16 then, gangly and uncertain, sneaking food from the kitchen while his father was occupied with the soldiers camped nearby. "That was you," he breathed, barely able to reconcile the frightened child with the composed woman standing before him. "But you disappeared. I came back on the 4th day, and you were gone. I thought," he swallowed hard, "I thought the soldiers might have found you." Her expression softened momentarily. "I ran when I heard them coming closer. Made my way north." Then, straightening her shoulders, she delivered the words that would upend his carefully ordered world. "Cowboy, I came to marry you. I'm the lost Apache girl you saved 10 years ago, and I've come to fulfill my promise." Heath stared at her, speechless. "Promise? What promise?" "In my people's way, when someone saves your life, it creates a bond. Before I left, I whispered a vow while you slept on the hay beside the loft ladder. I promised I would return when I became a woman." Her gaze held his, unwavering. "I have fulfilled much since then, learned the white man's ways, found my mother's people who were not Apache but Hopi. And now I am here to keep my word." Heath's mind reeled. Marriage? To a woman he'd met for 3 days as a child? "Miss Proudfoot, Fawn, I don't know what to say. That was a child's promise." "Surely you don't. I never speak words I don't mean," she interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "But I understand if you have already chosen another." Before Heath could respond, the ranch house door swung open and his younger sister Lily emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Heath, who's our visitor?" she called, making her way toward them with curious eyes. Heath turned to Fawn, noticing the slight tension that entered her shoulders at Lily's approach. What had this woman endured to find him again? And what exactly did she expect from him now? Lily, he said, finding his voice at last. This is Fawn Proudfoot. She's an old friend. Lily's expression brightened with friendly interest, but Heath couldn't tear his attention from Fawn's face. In her eyes, he saw determination mixed with something else. Vulnerability, perhaps, that tugged at him unexpectedly. What kind of life had she led in those 10 years? And why, after all this time, had she traveled so far to honor a child's promise to a boy who'd simply shared his bread? That evening, as sunset painted the distant mesas in shades of gold and crimson, Heath sat on the porch steps, turning the day's events over in his mind. Lily had insisted Fawn stay for supper and then for the night, preparing the small guest room with an enthusiasm that suggested she was starved for female companionship on the isolated ranch. Through the open window, he could hear the women's voices, Lily's animated chatter punctuated by Fawn's more measured responses. How strange to hear the Apache girl, no, woman, speaking perfect English, handling china teacups with the same ease she'd shown controlling her horse. The screen door creaked behind him, and Heath turned to find Fawn stepping onto the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. Your sister is very kind, she said, settling beside him on the step, maintaining a proper distance. She has been showing me the quilt she is making. Heath nodded, studying her profile in the fading light. Lily has a good heart. She's been running this household since our mother passed 3 years back. I am sorry for your loss. The simple words carried genuine feeling. And your father? Gone 5 years now. Caught in a flash flood while moving cattle. Heath cleared his throat against the familiar ache that accompanied thoughts of his parents. It's just me, Lily, and 2 ranch hands now. Silence fell between them, comfortable rather than awkward. The evening brought the scent of sage and distant rain, the chorus of crickets swelling as darkness claimed the land. Finally, Heath voiced the question that had troubled him all afternoon. Why did you really come back, Fawn? A childhood promise seems a fragile thing to build a future on. She turned to face him fully then, and in the silvery twilight, her expression was earnest. When you saved me, I had lost everything. My father to soldiers, my mother to sickness, my people scattered to the winds. I was no one, belonging nowhere. Her hands, small but strong, folded in her lap. But you saw me, not as Apache, not as enemy, just as a girl who needed help. In my darkest moment, you showed me kindness without wanting anything in return. She gazed out at the darkening ranch yard. I have traveled far, learned many things. I lived with missionaries who taught me to read, found my mother's Hopi relatives, even attended a school for Indian girls in Pennsylvania. But always, your face remained in my mind. The boy with kind eyes who risked his father's anger to bring me food. Heath struggled to find words. I did what anyone would have done. No. Her voice was firm. Not anyone. Not then. Not with Apache. Before he could respond, a distant sound caught his attention, horses approaching at speed. Heath rose, instantly alert, reaching by habit for the rifle that usually stood by the door. Expecting visitors? Fawn asked, also standing, her body tense with a wariness that spoke of hard-learned survival instincts. No, and not at this hour. He frowned, straining to see through the gathering darkness. Get inside. Tell Lily to douse the lamps. Could be nothing, but it could be trouble. Fawn finished, already moving toward the door. As she disappeared inside, Heath couldn't help wondering what new complications were galloping toward them out of the night, and whether Fawn's unexpected arrival had somehow drawn them here. 3 riders emerged from the darkness, their approach deliberate as they entered the pool of lantern light Heath had hung from the porch post. He stood with deceptive casualness, one hand resting near the revolver at his hip, the other holding a shotgun pointed carefully at the ground. Evening, gentlemen, he called, keeping his voice neutral. You're a fair piece from the main road. The lead rider, a weather-beaten man with a silver star pinned to his vest, raised his hand in a pacifying gesture. Sheriff Eli Marcus, Mr. Turner. Sorry to come calling after dark, but we're tracking someone who might have passed this way. Heath's thoughts immediately went to Fawn, but he kept his expression impassive. Not many travelers through here. Who are you looking for? The sheriff dismounted with a grunt, his companions, a young deputy, and a man in a suit that marked him as a townsman, remaining on horseback. Young woman, Indian or half-breed by appearances, riding alone, which is unusual enough. She's wanted for questioning about a stagecoach robbery near Fort Defiance last week. Heath's grip tightened imperceptibly on his shotgun. Robbery. Strong box taken, driver pistol whipped. The sheriff's eyes scanned the ranch yard. Witnesses described an Indian woman watching the stage earlier that day, asking questions about its route and cargo. 2 days later, masked men stopped the coach at a narrow pass. Most peculiar thing, though, one witness swore one of the men had a woman's voice. Heath forced a casual shrug. Haven't seen anyone matching that description. From the shadows near the barn came the soft nickering of a horse, Fawn's mount, which Heath had stabled earlier. The sheriff's gaze sharpened. That your sister's mare? Thought she rode a Palomino. New acquisition, Heath replied smoothly. Picked her up at the Prescott horse auction last month. The man in the suit spoke up, his eastern accent pronounced. Sheriff, we should check the outbuildings. If this woman has been stealing from the Western Union Company, we cannot simply take the word of, Mr. Wells represents the stage company. The sheriff interrupted, looking uncomfortable. He's eager to recover their property. Heath straightened, allowing the shotgun to rise slightly. You're welcome to look around in the morning, Sheriff. But my sister's already retired, and I don't take kindly to strangers prowling my property after dark, badge or no badge. The standoff lingered for several tense heartbeats before the sheriff nodded reluctantly. First light, then. We'll make camp down by the creek, if that suits. Suit yourself, Heath replied, not lowering the shotgun until the 3 riders had retreated into the darkness. When he finally stepped back inside, he found Fawn standing in the shadows of the parlor, her face unreadable. You heard? He asked quietly. She nodded. I should leave. Now, under cover of darkness. Is it true? The question escaped before he could consider it, blunt and demanding. Fawn's dark eyes flashed. You think I robbed a stagecoach? That I would come to the home of the man who saved me, bringing trouble to his door? Heath set down the shotgun, running a hand through his hair. I don't know what to think. 10 years is a long time, and you show up the same day the law comes looking for an Indian woman traveling alone. And this is how quickly your trust fades, she observed, her voice soft but cutting. Perhaps I was wrong about you, Heath Turner. She moved to step past him, but Heath caught her arm gently. Wait, I'm sorry. It's just, this is all happening very fast. Yesterday my biggest concern was getting the south pasture fence mended before the new calves arrived. Some of the tension left her shoulders, though her expression remained guarded. I understand your suspicion. In your place, I might feel the same. She hesitated, then added, I have not lived a perfect life, Heath. I have had to survive in a world that offers few kindnesses to a woman with copper skin. But I am not a thief, and I have never harmed anyone who didn't first try to harm me. The quiet pride in her voice touched something in Heath. Whatever Fawn Proudfoot had become in those 10 years, he sensed that her core, the determined spirit of the girl who had survived against impossible odds, remained true. The sheriff will be back at dawn, he said at last. We need to decide what to do before then. Fawn's gaze met his, searching. We? Yes, Heath replied, surprising himself with his certainty. We. Neither noticed Lily watching silently from the hallway, her young face troubled as she slipped back toward her bedroom, a letter clutched in her hand, a letter that had arrived just that morning, bearing news that would complicate matters even further. Dawn broke with the muted colors of an approaching storm. Heath had slept little, his mind churning with questions about Fawn and the decision that lay before him. He'd risen before first light, checking on the horses and finding Fawn's already saddled. She emerged from the house dressed for travel, her few belongings packed in saddlebags. You're leaving, he stated, leaning against the corral fence. It seems wisest. Her voice was calm, pragmatic. The sheriff has no proof against me, but a woman like me rarely receives the benefit of doubt. Better I draw any trouble away from your home. Heath studied her in the pearly light. And what about your proposal? Your promise? A flicker of emotion crossed her face before she composed it again. Some promises must bend to circumstance. I would not bring chaos into your ordered life, Heath Turner. And if I asked you to stay? The words surprised him even as he spoke them. Before she could answer, the ranch house door opened, and Lily hurried toward them, still buttoning her coat against the morning chill. Her usual cheerfulness was absent, replaced by an expression of worried determination. "Heath, you need to see this." She thrust a letter into his hands. "It came yesterday. I forgot in all the excitement of Miss Proudfoot's arrival." Heath unfolded the paper, skimming the formal language until the meaning became clear. His jaw tightened. "What is it?" Fawn asked, watching his face. "Trouble," he replied grimly. "Eastern Cattle Company claims they've purchased water rights to our creek from the territorial government. Says we've got 30 days to cease using the water or pay them a reasonable fee for access." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "Without that water, this ranch dies." "Can they do that?" Lily asked, her voice small. "They shouldn't be able to," Heath said. "Our water rights were established when Father homesteaded this land. But with these big Eastern money interests pushing into the territory." He trailed off, the implications clear. Fawn took the letter from his hand, smoothing it to read the details herself. "Blackwater Cattle and Development Company," she read aloud. "Based in Boston, with territorial offices in." She stopped suddenly, her expression changing. "Fort Defiance." Heath caught her meaning immediately. "Same place as the stage robbery." "Yes." Her dark eyes met his, a new understanding forming between them. The strong box that was taken, it might have contained documents. Land deeds, water rights. Papers that could prove whether their claim is legal, Heath finished. Or not. The sound of approaching horses cut their conversation short. Sheriff Marcus and his companions rode into view, right on schedule. Fawn stepped closer to Heath, speaking quickly and quietly. "I need you to trust me now, even when it seems you shouldn't." Before he could question her, she walked forward to meet the sheriff, her posture straight and dignified. "Good morning, Sheriff," she called. "I understand you're looking for me." Sheriff Marcus dismounted slowly, his weathered face registering surprise before settling into professional caution. "And you would be?" "Fawn Proudfoot." She stood calmly, making no attempt to hide or flee. "I believe you have questions about a stagecoach robbery." The company man, Wells, practically leapt from his saddle. "That's her. I recognize her from the descriptions." "Sheriff, arrest this woman immediately." Marcus raised a hand to quiet Wells, his eyes never leaving Fawn. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you some questions. Mr. Turner, I presume this is the woman you claimed not to have seen last night." Heath moved to stand beside Fawn, his expression unapologetic. "You came hunting an Indian woman. Miss Proudfoot is a family friend." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Family friend, is it? Well, that's as may be, but she's still coming with us to answer some questions about her whereabouts last week." "I was nowhere near Fort Defiance on the day of the robbery," Fawn stated clearly. "I was in Prescott, meeting with a territorial judge about a land dispute affecting my mother's people." "Can you prove that?" Wells demanded. "Judge Henry Williams," Fawn replied steadily. "We met in his chambers on Tuesday afternoon, along with 2 tribal elders. You are welcome to telegraph him for confirmation." The sheriff looked thoughtful, but Wells wasn't satisfied. "A likely story. Sheriff, this woman matches the description perfectly. And what would an Indian woman be doing meeting with a territorial judge?" "Miss Proudfoot is educated in white man's law," Heath interjected, earning a surprised glance from Fawn. "She advocates for Indian land rights. Isn't that right, Fawn?" She nodded, a flicker of appreciation in her eyes for how quickly he'd followed her lead. "Yes. The Hopi have lost several sacred springs to cattle interests recently." Judge Williams was sympathetic but explained the legal complexities. The sheriff scratched his chin. "We can verify this with the judge, I suppose. But that still leaves the question of what brings you to this remote ranch, Miss Proudfoot." "I came to visit the Turner family because Heath once showed great kindness to my people," Fawn replied smoothly. "And because I believe we might have a common interest in challenging the Blackwater Cattle Company's territorial claims." Wells's face reddened. "What are you implying?" "Nothing at all," Fawn said innocently. "Merely noting that many recent water rights purchases have been, shall we say, questionable in their legal standing." The sheriff frowned. "What's this about water rights?" Heath handed over the crumpled letter. "Just received notice that a Boston company claims they now own our creek water. Same company has an office in Fort Defiance. Interesting coincidence, wouldn't you say?" Marcus read the letter, his frown deepening. "This is outside my jurisdiction. Water rights disputes go through territorial courts. Unless," Fawn suggested quietly. Those rights were secured through fraudulent means. Or if documents proving prior claims were conveniently removed from circulation. Wells shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. These accusations are outrageous. Sheriff, we came for a robbery suspect, not to discuss water rights. Indeed we did. The sheriff agreed, handing the letter back to Heath. Miss Proudfoot, I'm afraid I'll still need you to come to town and provide a formal statement. If Judge Williams confirms your whereabouts, you'll be free to go. Fawn nodded calmly. I understand. May I have a moment to gather my belongings? As she turned toward the house, Heath caught her arm. I'm coming with you. That's not necessary, she began, but Heath cut her off. It is to me. His blue eyes held hers, conveying more than his words. Besides, I need to consult with the county clerk about our water rights. We can ride together. The subtle shift in their relationship wasn't lost on Sheriff Marcus, who watched them with the shrewd assessment of a man who'd spent decades reading people. We'll wait here, he said finally. Don't be long. As they walked toward the house, Heath murmured, You think Wells is connected to the robbery? I think it's a remarkable coincidence that documents proving land ownership have gone missing just as companies are claiming new rights to old territories, Fawn replied softly. And I think a man who traveled all the way from Boston might have more at stake than a single stolen strong box. Heath glanced back at Wells, noting the man's nervous fidgeting and the way he avoided meeting the sheriff's eyes. You really were in Prescott meeting a judge? Fawn's lips curved slightly. Yes, though not about Hopi land rights specifically. Then what? Heath began, but they had reached the porch where Lily waited anxiously. You can't go with them, she protested. What if it's a trap? It's not the sheriff I'm worried about, Heath assured her, quickly explaining their suspicions about Wells and the connection to their water rights dispute. Lily's eyes widened. So you think this company stole its own strongbox to hide evidence that might prove their claims are fraudulent? Or hired someone to do it, Fawn suggested. Either way, the timing is suspicious. What should I do while you're gone? Lily asked, practical even in her concern. He thought quickly. Send Miguel to alert our neighbors about this water rights issue. The Hendersons and Old Man Jenkins both draw from tributaries of our creek. If this company is targeting our water, they're likely after theirs too. As Lily hurried to find their ranch hand, Fawn touched Heath's arm lightly. You trust me, she observed, sounding faintly surprised. Let's just say I'm willing to bet that a woman who kept a childhood promise for 10 years probably isn't a common thief. He replied with the hint of a smile. Besides, something about this whole situation feels wrong, and my father always said to trust my instincts. Your father sounds like a wise man, Fawn said softly. He was. Heath met her gaze directly. And when this is settled, I want to hear the real reason you came back after all these years. The whole truth, Fawn. She held his gaze steadily. When this is settled, she agreed. No more half-truths between us. Neither realized how soon that promise would be tested, or how dangerous the full truth might prove to be. The journey to Silver Springs, the county seat, took most of the day. Heath rode beside Fawn, with the sheriff's party leading the way. Their conversation remained limited under the watchful eyes of their escorts, but Heath found himself studying Fawn when she wasn't looking. The straight line of her back as she rode, the confident way she handled her mount, the thoughtful intelligence in her eyes when they discussed their situation during brief rest stops. She was nothing like the frightened child he remembered, yet he occasionally caught glimpses of that same fierce determination that had kept her alive when her world collapsed. The mystery of who she'd become in those intervening years intrigued him more with each passing hour. By late afternoon, the small procession rode into Silver Springs, a growing settlement that had sprung up around silver mining operations in the nearby mountains. The main street bustled with the usual frontier mix, miners coming off shift, merchants closing up shop, women hurrying to complete errands before dinner. Sheriff Marcus led them directly to the courthouse, a substantial stone building that spoke to the town's prosperity and ambitions. Inside, they were directed to a clerk who confirmed that a telegraph had already been sent to Judge Williams in Prescott at the sheriff's earlier request. Might take until morning to get a reply. The clerk informed them apologetically. Judge was due to ride circuit today. Wells, who had grown increasingly agitated throughout the journey, protested immediately. Sheriff, we can't just let this woman roam free while we wait. The evidence? What evidence, Mr. Wells? Marcus interrupted, his patience visibly wearing thin. So far all we have is a vague description that could match half the Indian women in the territory and Miss Proudfoot's claim of being elsewhere, which we're now verifying. But the timing of her arrival at Turner's ranch, the suspicious nature of her business, is not enough to hold her in a cell overnight, the sheriff finished firmly. Miss Proudfoot has cooperated fully. Unless you have something more substantial than coincidence and suspicion, she's free to go about her business in town until we receive confirmation from Judge Williams. Wells sputtered indignantly, but could offer nothing concrete. With a final warning that they shouldn't leave town, Sheriff Marcus departed for his office, leaving Heath and Fawn standing in the courthouse corridor with the fuming company representative. "This isn't over," Wells muttered before storming out, the heavy door slamming behind him. Once alone, Heath turned to Fawn. "We should find rooms for the night and get something to eat." "First," Fawn countered, "we should visit the county records office before it closes. I want to see what documentation exists about your water rights and what might be missing." The records clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, was preparing to close for the day when they arrived, but was persuaded to assist them by Heath's earnest explanation of their situation. "Water rights for Turner Ranch, Copper Creek watershed," the clerk muttered, rifling through a large index. "Established 1870. Should be in Cabinet 7, Section C." He disappeared into a forest of tall filing cabinets, returning several minutes later with a puzzled expression and a thin folder. "This is odd," he remarked, spreading the contents on his desk. "The original claim documentation is here, but there should be a second file with the territorial validation certificates. Those appear to be missing." Heath and Fawn exchanged significant looks. "How long have they been missing?" Heath asked. The clerk adjusted his spectacles, examining the checkout log. "According to this, they were last requested 3 weeks ago by a Mr. Edwin Wells, representing Blackwater Cattle and Development Company. They were supposed to be returned the following day." He looked up, frowning. "They never were. And without those certificates." Fawn prompted. "Well, technically, your claim could be considered unvalidated. Not void, mind you, but vulnerable to challenge if someone filed a competing claim with proper documentation." The clerk shook his head disapprovingly. "Highly irregular. I'll need to report this to the district land commissioner." As they left the records office, Heath's expression was thunderous. "Wells took our certificates, then his company filed a competing claim. When we contest it, they'll produce some forged documents and say ours were never properly registered. A scheme they've likely repeated across the territory," Fawn agreed quietly. "The question is, where are the original documents now? Were they in the strongbox that was stolen?" Heath considered this as they walked toward the hotel. If so, who has them? The robbers Wells claims to be chasing? Or did Wells himself arrange the robbery to create a convenient explanation for why the documents can't be produced if questioned? Either way, Fawn said thoughtfully, someone in this town knows something. The stagecoach driver who was attacked, perhaps, or whoever might have been hired to stage the robbery. They paused outside the Silver Dollar Hotel, a respectable 2-story establishment catering to the town's better class of visitors. "I'll see about rooms," Heath said. "Then maybe we should visit the saloon. If anyone knows about local mischief, it'll be the bartender." Fawn raised an eyebrow. I doubt a woman walking alone into a frontier saloon will get the kind of information we need," Heath pointed out. "Besides, I'm not letting you out of my sight until we sort this out." A hint of amusement touched Fawn's lips. "Your concern is touching, but I assure you I've navigated far more dangerous situations than a small-town saloon." "I don't doubt it," Heath replied, suddenly serious. "But that doesn't mean you should have to face this alone. Whatever your reasons for coming back, Fawn, you're not alone anymore." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a moment of vulnerability quickly masked. "Very well," she said finally. "We'll work together. But first, I need to change into something more suitable for gathering information in a saloon." Heath watched her climb the hotel stairs after securing their rooms, wondering exactly what she meant by more suitable, and why the thought made his pulse quicken with both curiosity and concern. The Silver Dollar Saloon hummed with early evening activity, miners spending their day's wages, cowboys passing through town, and the usual assortment of gamblers and drifters that populated any frontier establishment. Heath pushed through the batwing doors, pausing to let his eyes adjust to the smoky interior. Beside him, Fawn had transformed herself. Gone was the practical riding outfit, replaced by a deep burgundy dress that, while modest by saloon standards, accentuated her slender figure and complemented her copper skin. She'd loosened her hair from its tight braid, letting it fall in dark waves over her shoulders, with only the sides pinned up to frame her face. The overall effect was striking. She looked neither fully white nor fully Indian, but something fascinatingly in between. Men turned to stare as they made their way to the bar, their gazes a mixture of appreciation and curiosity. Heath found himself stepping closer to Fawn, a protective instinct rising that he hadn't anticipated. "Whiskey," he told the bartender, "and a glass of wine for the lady." The barman, a burly fellow with an impressive mustache, raised an eyebrow at Fawn but poured their drinks without comment. "New in town?" he asked conversationally as he slid their glasses across the polished wood. "Just passing through," Heath replied, laying coins on the bar. "Heard there was some excitement recently. Stagecoach robbery?" The bartender nodded, lowering his voice. "Bad business, that. Johnny Parker, he's the driver, got his head cracked pretty good. Still recovering over at Doc Wilson's place." "Anyone catch who did it?" Heath asked, keeping his tone casual. "Nope. Johnny says it was 3 men, faces covered, but one had a strange voice. High-pitched," he said. The bartender leaned closer. "Between you and me, some folks think it wasn't men at all, least not all of them. Rumors about an Indian woman being involved." Fawn sipped her wine, her expression betraying nothing. "That seems far-fetched," she commented mildly. "A woman planning a stagecoach robbery?" The bartender shrugged. "Strange things happen out here, ma'am. Besides, it wasn't just any strongbox they took. Word is it contained some important papers belonging to that big Eastern cattle outfit, Blackwater something." "Blackwater Cattle and Development," Heath supplied. "Their man Wells seems pretty worked up about it." "Wells?" The bartender made a sour face. "That Boston dandy's been nothing but trouble since he got here. Throwing money around, asking questions about water rights all over the county. Got half the small ranchers worried they're about to lose access to streams their cattle have been drinking from for years." A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Edwin Wells himself stumbled through the batwing doors, clearly already in his cups despite the early hour. He lurched toward the bar, not immediately noticing Heath and Fawn. "Whiskey," he demanded, slapping coins down. "And information. I'm looking for a woman, Indian or half-breed. Might be traveling with a cowboy." He turned, swaying slightly, and froze when he spotted them. "You." Heath straightened, positioning himself subtly between Wells and Fawn. "Evening, Wells. Drowning your sorrows." Wells's face flushed with anger or drink, perhaps both. "You think you're clever, don't you? Both of you. But you have no idea what you're meddling with." "Enlighten us," Fawn suggested coolly. Wells jabbed a finger in her direction. "You may have fooled the sheriff, but I know what you are. The company has powerful friends, territorial officials, judges, even U.S. Marshals. By the time this is settled, Turner Ranch will be Blackwater property, and you'll be in a territorial prison." Heath's hands clenched, but Fawn laid a restraining touch on his arm. "Strong words from a man who steals legal documents and files fraudulent claims," she observed, her voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby patrons. Wells blanched. "You can't prove anything." "Perhaps not yet," Fawn agreed. "But missing documents have a way of resurfacing at inconvenient moments. I wonder how your employers would react if they knew your methods might expose them to federal prosecution." Something calculating entered Wells's bloodshot eyes. "You know," he said slowly, "arrangements could be made. The company only wants the water rights. They could lease the land back to Turner at a reasonable rate. As for any misunderstandings about documentation, I'm sure we could reach an accommodation." "Are you attempting to bribe us, Mr. Wells?" Fawn asked, her tone making the question sound like an accusation. Wells glanced nervously at the now attentive barman and the other customers within earshot. "I'm merely suggesting a business arrangement that would benefit all parties," he muttered, deflating somewhat. "Think about it. You have until morning, when the sheriff gets his telegram." He grabbed his whiskey and retreated to a corner table, his earlier bluster replaced by sullen calculation. Heath turned to Fawn, speaking quietly. "He's worried. Whatever game he's playing, he knows he's vulnerable." "Yes," Fawn agreed thoughtfully. "And he mentioned morning. He knows something about what that telegram will reveal." Her dark eyes met Heath's. "I think it's time we paid a visit to Johnny Parker," the stagecoach driver. If anyone saw the robbers clearly, it would be him. As they left the saloon, neither noticed the man who detached himself from the shadows near the back door, following at a discreet distance. Nor could they have guessed that Lily Turner, miles away at the ranch, was at that moment making a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about Fawn Proudfoot's return. Doc Wilson's modest house sat at the quiet end of town, a lantern burning in the front window despite the late hour. The physician himself, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a perpetually worried expression, answered Heath's knock. "We're sorry to disturb you so late, Doctor," Heath began. "But we'd like to speak with Johnny Parker if he's well enough for visitors." The doctor frowned. "Johnny's still recovering. Had a nasty concussion from that attack. May I ask what this is about?" Fawn stepped forward. "We believe there may be a connection between the stagecoach robbery and a land dispute affecting Mr. Turner's ranch. We won't tire Mr. Parker, but his recollection of the incident could be extremely valuable." Dr. Wilson hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes, no more. He needs rest." He led them through the small house to a back bedroom where a man with a bandaged head lay propped against pillows, a book open on his lap. "Johnny, these folks would like to ask you about the robbery. Feel up to answering a few questions." Parker, a weather-beaten man in his 40s, set aside his book with interest. "Sure thing. Document gets boring just lying here anyway." After brief introductions, Heath got straight to the point. "Mr. Parker, we understand you got a good look at the robbers before they attacked you. Can you describe them?" Parker touched his bandaged head gingerly. "Not as good a look as I'd have liked. 3 of them, all wearing kerchiefs over their faces. 2 were average-sized men, nothing special. The third was smaller. Thought at first it was a boy, but the voice." He shook his head slowly. "When they demanded the strongbox, that one spoke. Wasn't a man's voice, no matter how they tried to rough it up." "A woman?" Fawn asked quietly. "That's my guess, though I can't swear to it." Parker's eyes narrowed as he studied Fawn. "About your height, maybe. Hard to tell much more with the disguise." "What about their horses?" Heath pressed. "Anything distinctive?" Parker's face brightened. Now there was something odd. 2 rode regular cow ponies, but the third, the one I think was a woman, rode a fine black mare with a white star on its forehead. Thoroughbred blood, I'd wager. Not the kind of horse your average bandit rides." Fawn and Heath exchanged glances. "This strongbox," Fawn continued. "Did they take anything else? Money? Valuables?" "That's the strange part," Parker replied. "There was a cash box with the weekly payroll for the Silverado mine, nearly $500. They didn't touch it. Only wanted that Blackwater Company strongbox with their precious documents." "One last question, Mr. Parker," Heath said. "Had you seen any of them before? Perhaps watching the stage, asking about schedules?" Parker's brow furrowed in concentration. "Well, there was a woman in Fort Defiance the day before, asking when we'd be carrying company documents. Indian woman, well-spoken, but she wasn't trying to hide herself or be secretive. Came right up to the station office, bold as brass." "Did she give a name?" Fawn asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Called herself Miss Proudfoot," Parker replied. "Said she represented some Indian Land Rights Association." The room fell silent. Dr. Wilson looked between them with growing concern, while Heath fought to keep his expression impassive. "I see," Fawn said finally. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Parker. You've been most helpful." Outside, in the quiet street, Heath turned to Fawn, his face tight with confusion and the beginnings of anger. "You were there. You asked about the strongbox. Were you involved in this robbery, Fawn?" Her dark eyes met his steadily. "Not in the way you think. Yes, I was in Fort Defiance. Yes, I inquired about the Blackwater Company's shipments. But I did not rob that stage, Heath. I did not hurt that man." "Then explain," he demanded, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with Parker's account. "No more half-truths, remember?" Fawn glanced around the deserted street, then spoke softly. "Not here. We're being watched." She nodded almost imperceptibly toward a shadowy figure lounging across the street. "Let's return to the hotel. I promise I'll tell you everything there." The walk back was tense with unspoken questions, Heath's mind racing with possibilities, none of them comforting. Had he been a fool to trust her? Was her story about coming to marry him merely a clever cover for some other purpose? Yet even as doubts crowded his thoughts, he couldn't ignore the instinct that told him there was more to Fawn Proudfoot's story than simple deception. The woman who had ridden boldly into his ranch, who had faced the sheriff without flinching, who had cleverly maneuvered Wells into revealing his hand. This was not a common criminal. Whatever her secrets, Heath realized he needed to hear them, not just for the sake of his ranch and his water rights, but for something more personal that he wasn't quite ready to name. In the privacy of Fawn's hotel room, with the door locked and voices kept low, the truth finally emerged. A story more complex than Heath could have imagined. I did not lie when I said I came to honor my childhood promise, Fawn began, sitting across from him beside the small fireplace. But it wasn't the only reason I sought you out. She folded her hands in her lap, gathering her thoughts. After I fled your father's barn, I eventually made my way north to Hopi territory. My mother had been Hopi before she married my Apache father. Her people took me in, though I was always somewhat apart, too Apache for the Hopi, too influenced by white ways to fully belong anywhere. The firelight played across her features as she continued. A missionary school near the reservation accepted me. I learned to read, to write, to speak as white people speak. When I showed aptitude, they arranged for me to attend a school for Indian girls in Pennsylvania. Heath's eyebrows rose in surprise. Pennsylvania? That's a long way from Arizona territory. Yes, the school's purpose was to civilize Indian children, to strip away our culture and replace it with yours. A shadow crossed her face. It was difficult, but I learned to use white man's tools, his language, his laws, his ways of thinking. And then, Heath prompted when she paused. I returned west 3 years ago, determined to help my people protect what little they had left. I discovered a talent for understanding legal documents, for finding the gaps between what was promised in treaties and what was delivered. A hint of pride entered her voice. I became known among the tribes as someone who could speak to white officials in their own language, who understood their papers and procedures. So you became an advocate, Heath said, beginning to understand. That's why you were meeting with Judge Williams and Prescott. Yes, but 6 months ago, I began hearing troubling stories from across the territory. Small ranchers, Indian communities, even some mining camps, all losing water rights to Eastern companies through suspicious legal maneuvers. The same pattern repeated. Documents would disappear from county offices, then reappear altered or be replaced with new ones showing the company's prior claim. Heath leaned forward. Blackwater. Fawn nodded. They were the worst offenders. I started tracking their activities, gathering evidence of their fraud. When I learned they were targeting ranches along Copper Creek, I remembered the boy who had shown me kindness. Her eyes met his. I came to warn you, Heath. The marriage proposal was, well, it wasn't entirely false. I have thought of you over the years, but protecting your water rights gave me a reason to seek you out now. And the stagecoach? Heath asked, still troubled by Parker's account. Fawn's expression grew more guarded. I did go to Fort Defiance to inquire about Blackwater's shipments. I needed to know what documents they were moving, whether they might be the missing water rights certificates from across the territory. But I did not rob that stage. Then who did? Heath pressed. Someone who knew what you were looking for? Someone working with you? She hesitated, then sighed. My associate was supposed to observe only. When he discovered the strongbox contained exactly the evidence we needed, he made a decision without consulting me. By the time I learned what had happened, it was done. Your associate, Heath repeated, a new understanding dawning. The third robber, the one with the strange voice. A woman. My friend Raven, Fawn admitted. She's Navajo, educated like me. We've worked together before, gathering evidence against land thieves. She and 2 trusted men intercepted the stage, but they never intended violence. The driver's injury was an accident when he reached for his shotgun. Heath stood, pacing the small room as he absorbed this revelation. So you're telling me that somewhere out there, your friends have a strongbox full of stolen, or rather, recovered, water rights certificates that could prove Blackwater's claims are fraudulent? Yes, including yours. Fawn rose too, facing him directly. Heath, I never meant to bring trouble to your door. I thought I could warn you, help you protect your land, and perhaps. She faltered for the first time, a hint of vulnerability showing through her composed exterior. Perhaps see if the boy I remembered had become a man I could truly care for. The simple honesty in those last words cut through Heath's confusion and lingering anger. Whatever else was happening, he believed her feelings, at least, were genuine. Where are these documents now? he asked, his voice softening. Hidden, Fawn replied. Raven was supposed to meet me at your ranch the day after I arrived. When she didn't appear, I grew concerned. Now, with Wells and the sheriff looking for an Indian woman connected to the robbery, you think she might have been captured? Or worse? Fawn nodded grimly. We need to find her before Wells does. And we need those documents if we're going to stop Blackwater from stealing your water rights, and everyone else's along the creek. A knock at the door interrupted them. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. It was well past midnight, too late for any innocent visitor. Miss Proudfoot, Sheriff Marcus's voice called through the door. I need to speak with you immediately. It's urgent. Heath moved instinctively toward the window, but Fawn shook her head, whispering, running will only confirm guilt. She straightened her dress and went to the door, opening it with remarkable composure. Sheriff Marcus stood in the hallway, his expression grave. Behind him stood a tall woman in travel-stained clothes, her wrists bound before her. Miss Proudfoot, the sheriff said formally. This woman was captured near Turner Ranch this evening. Says her name is Raven Nighthorse. Claims she knows you. His shrewd eyes studied Fawn's reaction. Would you care to explain why your associate was carrying these? He held up several official-looking documents bearing territorial seals, water rights certificates, including one with the Turner name clearly visible. Fawn's carefully constructed world began to crumble around her, and as she met Raven's defeated eyes, she realized that her past had finally caught up with her and threatened to sweep away not just her future, but Heath's as well. The sheriff's office was quiet at that late hour, save for the occasional creak of the building settling and the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. Heath sat on a hard wooden bench outside the cell area, hat in hands, trying to make sense of the night's revelations. Inside the cells, Fawn and Raven Nighthorse were deep in whispered conversation, their words inaudible from where he sat. Sheriff Marcus had placed them in adjoining cells, but warned they'd be separated if he suspected they were coordinating stories. The recovered documents lay spread across the sheriff's desk, water rights certificates from a dozen small ranches and farms, including the Turners. Each showed clear signs of tampering, with dates altered and official stamps that, upon close inspection, didn't quite match the territorial seal. Quite a mess your lady friend is in, Sheriff Marcus commented, returning from the back room with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Heath and settled behind his desk. Conspiracy, theft, possibly assault if Parker's injury worsens. Heath accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. She didn't rob that stage. Maybe not personally, the sheriff allowed, but her friend in there has already admitted involvement, trying to protect Miss Proudfoot. Said it was her idea to recover the stolen documents. Because they were stolen, Heath insisted. Look at those certificates. The originals were taken from county offices and replaced with these forgeries. Blackwater's been systematically stealing water rights across the territory. Marcus sipped his coffee thoughtfully. I'm not saying you're wrong about Blackwater. These documents do look suspicious, and Wells's behavior doesn't inspire confidence. But taking the law into your own hands isn't the answer. What about when the law is being manipulated by men with money and influence? Heath countered. What recourse do small ranchers and Indian communities have then? Before the sheriff could answer, the office door burst open. Lily Turner rushed in, her face flushed from exertion, followed by an apologetic deputy. Sorry, Sheriff, the young lawman stammered. She insisted it was urgent, Heath. Lily cried, ignoring the deputy. You won't believe what I found. I was cleaning the guest room after Miss Proudfoot left, and this fell from behind the dresser. She thrust a folded paper into her brother's hands. Heath opened it carefully, revealing a letter written in an elegant female hand. As he read, his expression changed from confusion to shock. What is it? Sheriff Marcus asked, rising from his desk. It's a letter to Fawn, Heath said slowly, from our mother. A stunned silence fell over the room. Your mother? The sheriff repeated. I don't understand. Heath read aloud. My dearest Fawn, if you are reading this, you have finally returned to claim your birthright. I have kept our secret all these years to protect both you and Heath from those who would not understand. Your Apache father loved you dearly, as did I, but the prejudices of this land made it impossible for us to be together as a family. His voice faltered as he continued silently, the implications of his mother's words sinking in. Heath, Lily prompted softly. What does it mean? He looked up, his face pale with shock. It means Fawn is our half-sister. Our mother had a relationship with an Apache man before she married our father. Fawn was their child. From the doorway to the cells came a quiet voice. Not quite. They turned to find Fawn standing at the bars, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of resignation and relief. Sheriff Marcus had allowed her into the corridor between cells to speak with Heath, though her wrists remained bound. I found that letter a week ago, she explained. It was hidden in a small compartment in the jewelry box your mother gave me before I fled. I've carried that box all these years, never knowing its secret until recently. Then you knew? Heath demanded, rising from the bench. When you came to the ranch proposing marriage, you knew we shared a mother? No, Fawn said firmly. The letter doesn't tell the whole truth. Your mother, Margaret Turner, was not my birth mother. She was my guardian, my protector. She took a deep breath. She was my father's lover, yes, but my mother was Howling Dove of the Mescalero Apache. She died when I was born. Heath's brow furrowed in confusion. Then why would our mother write this letter claiming you as her daughter? To protect me, Fawn replied simply. To give me a claim to Turner land that no one could dispute if I ever returned. A half-white daughter of Margaret Turner would have legal rights that an Apache ward would not. Sheriff Marcus cleared his throat. This is all very interesting, but I don't see how it changes the current situation regarding the stagecoach robbery. It changes everything, Lily interjected unexpectedly. Sheriff, if Fawn is our family, by blood or by our mother's choice, then the documents she recovered were rightfully ours to begin with. She was retrieving stolen property, not committing theft. That's not exactly how the law works, Miss Turner. The sheriff began, but Heath interrupted. What if we could prove Blackwater's entire operation is based on fraud? That Wells has been systematically stealing and forging documents to seize water rights across the territory. You'd need solid evidence and witnesses willing to testify, Marcus replied skeptically. We have the evidence, Heath said, gesturing to the documents on the desk. And I think we can find the witnesses too, starting with the county clerk who reported the missing certificates. A new voice entered the conversation. I believe I might be of assistance there. All heads turned toward the door, where Judge Henry Williams stood, travel-worn but dignified in his formal attire. Beside him, the young deputy looked thoroughly confused by the parade of late-night visitors. Judge Williams, Sheriff Marcus said, rising quickly. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow at the earliest. I received your telegram regarding Miss Proudfoot and decided the matter warranted my immediate attention. The judge stepped fully into the office, surveying the scene with shrewd eyes. I've been investigating a pattern of suspicious land transactions across the territory. When I heard Miss Proudfoot had been implicated in a stagecoach robbery involving Blackwater Company documents, I suspected there might be a connection. Fawn's expression brightened with cautious hope. You believe me, then? About Blackwater's fraudulent claims. Let's say I find the timing and circumstances highly suspicious, the judge replied carefully. Particularly now that I see these altered certificates. He moved to examine the documents on the sheriff's desk. Yes, these show the same pattern of forgery I've observed in other cases. The territorial seal is slightly misshapen, a good copy, but not authentic. Sheriff Marcus frowned. Even if Blackwater is engaged in fraud, taking the law into your own hands is still a crime. Indeed it is, Judge Williams agreed. However, there may be extenuating circumstances to consider. If Miss Proudfoot and her associate were attempting to recover stolen property and expose a larger criminal enterprise. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. Sheriff, I'd like to speak with Mr. Wells immediately. I believe he may have more to tell us about Blackwater's operations in the territory. As the deputy was dispatched to bring Wells in for questioning, Heath moved closer to Fawn's cell. Why didn't you tell me about the letter? He asked quietly. About your connection to my mother? Fawn's eyes met his, vulnerability showing through her usual composure. I wasn't sure how you'd react, and I needed to be certain of the truth myself. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Your mother was kind to me in those 3 days, Heath. She brought extra food, a blanket, even sat with me while you were doing chores. She whispered stories of her own childhood, songs in a language I didn't know. I was too young to understand then what she might have been to my father. Heath absorbed this, memories of his mother taking on new dimensions. She never spoke of it, never gave any hint. Those were different times, Fawn said softly. A white woman and an Apache man. The world would not have been kind to such a union. Before Heath could respond, commotion erupted at the front of the office. The deputy returned, his face flushed with exertion. "Sheriff, Wells is gone. His room at the hotel is empty. Looks like he packed in a hurry. The stable boy says he rented a horse about an hour ago, heading south, toward the territorial border," Judge Williams observed grimly. "And likely beyond our jurisdiction. He must have realized the game was up when we found Raven with the documents," Heath said, frustration evident in his voice. "Without Wells to testify, can we still prove Blackwater's fraud?" The judge exchanged a significant look with Sheriff Marcus. "Perhaps. These forged certificates are compelling evidence. If we can locate other victims of their scheme who are willing to come forward." "I know at least a dozen," Fawn offered from her cell. "Ranchers, farmers, tribal leaders, all with similar stories of missing documents and sudden claims against their water rights." As the men discussed legal strategies, Lily moved closer to Fawn's cell. "If what you say is true, if our mother wanted to protect you, then you are family, regardless of blood," she said quietly. "And family stands together." Fawn's composed expression wavered, emotion briefly overwhelming her careful control. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." Heath, overhearing this exchange, felt something shift within him, not just his understanding of Fawn and their complicated connection, but his feelings toward her as well. The woman who had ridden into his life with a proposal of marriage was not his lost Apache sister, but neither was she a stranger. She was something else entirely, a link to his mother's hidden past, a defender of his family's land, and perhaps, still, a woman he could come to care for deeply. As dawn broke over Silver Springs, illuminating the sheriff's office with soft golden light, the path forward remained uncertain. But for the first time since this journey began, Heath felt the pieces of this puzzle beginning to align, revealing a picture more complex, more challenging, and ultimately more hopeful than he could have imagined. 2 weeks later, the Turner Ranch buzzed with activity as neighbors gathered for an impromptu celebration. Judge Williams had ruled that all water rights claims filed by Blackwater Cattle and Development Company were to be suspended pending a full investigation, and the original certificates had been restored to their rightful owners. Edwin Wells remained at large, but federal marshals had been dispatched to Boston to investigate the company's headquarters and officers. Under a canopy of cottonwood trees, tables laden with food stretched along the creek bank, the very water source that had nearly been stolen from them. Children splashed in the shallows while adults exchanged stories of similar encounters with Blackwater representatives, each realizing they had not been alone in facing the company's predatory tactics. Heath stood slightly apart, watching the festivities with satisfaction. The battle wasn't completely won. Corporate interests would continue pressing into the territory, and small ranchers would always struggle against those with more money and influence. But today's victory felt significant. "You've united the valley," Fawn observed, joining him beneath a towering cottonwood. Blackwater thought these people would fight their battles individually. They never expected them to stand together. In the 2 weeks since their return from Silver Springs, Fawn had settled into a curious position at the ranch. Not quite family, not quite guest. After Judge Williams had released her and Raven with a stern warning about vigilante justice, she had helped organize the neighboring ranchers, gathering testimonies and evidence for the judge's investigation. "We couldn't have done it without you," Heath acknowledged. "Your knowledge of the legal system, your connections with other victims of their scheme, you turned the tide." Fawn smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. "Perhaps we make a good team." The afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves above them, dappling her copper skin and highlighting the rich darkness of her hair, now styled in a simple braid adorned with a blue ribbon that matched her dress, one of Lily's, altered to fit her taller frame. "Fawn," Heath began hesitantly, "we haven't really talked about what happens next." She turned to face him fully, her dark eyes meeting his. "No, we haven't. When you first arrived, you came with a proposal," he reminded her, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I believe your exact words were, Cowboy. I came to marry you." A blush darkened her cheeks. "I did say that, didn't I? Before I knew about your mother's letter, before all this complexity. And now?" Heath asked softly. Fawn looked out over the gathering, her expression thoughtful. "Now I know that the connection between us is different than I imagined. You're not the boy I idealized all those years, And I'm not the lost Apache girl you once saved. We're both more complicated than those memories. That doesn't answer my question, Heath pressed gently. She met his gaze again, vulnerability and strength mingled in her expression. I still feel drawn to you, Heath Turner. Not because of a childhood promise or misplaced gratitude, but because of who you've proven yourself to be these past weeks. Honorable, determined, compassionate. She hesitated, then added, but I would understand if recent revelations have changed how you see me. Heath took a step closer, close enough that he could speak without being overheard by the nearby guests. Learning about your connection to my mother was a shock, he admitted. But you're not my sister, Fawn. You never were. In these past weeks, watching you fight for this land, seeing your courage and intelligence, I've come to admire the woman you've become. Hope flickered in her eyes, but caution tempered it. The territory isn't kind to couples who cross certain boundaries. A white rancher and a woman-raised Apache, many would disapprove. Let them, Heath said simply. This land is changing. The old prejudices are still strong, but not unbeatable. He gestured toward the gathering, where Raven Nighthorse was deep in conversation with the Henderson boys, all three laughing at some shared joke. Look around you. 2 weeks ago, these ranchers might have viewed you with suspicion. Now they're celebrating alongside you. Fawn followed his gaze, her expression softening. It's a beginning, perhaps. That's all I'm suggesting, Heath said, taking her hand in his. A beginning. Not a childhood promise fulfilled, but something new built on who we are now. He smiled, the warmth reaching his eyes. I'm not proposing marriage today, Fawn Proudfoot. I'm proposing we give ourselves time to truly know each other, to see if what's growing between us is strong enough to weather whatever comes. Relief and happiness transformed her face. I would like that very much. As if on cue, Lily approached, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. You two should join the party, she scolded good-naturedly. The Hendersons are asking for a proper introduction to the Indian lady lawyer who saved our water. Fawn accepted the lemonade with a grateful smile. Not a lawyer, exactly. Near enough for these parts, Lily insisted. And Judge Williams mentioned something about you possibly studying law formally. Did I hear that correctly? He offered to sponsor my application to read law with a firm in Prescott, Fawn acknowledged. It would mean traveling back and forth, dividing my time between legal studies and... Heath prompted. Fawn's eyes met his, a new confidence in her gaze. And building that beginning we discussed. Lily looked between them, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Well, whatever you decide, you'll always have a home here, Fawn. Mother would have wanted that. As they rejoined the celebration, Heath found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. When Fawn had ridden onto his ranch declaring herself the lost Apache girl he'd saved, he could never have imagined the complex truth behind her return, or the future they might build together. The path ahead would not be easy. The territory was still wild, attitudes toward mixed relationships still hostile in many quarters, and Blackwater's defeat, while significant, was likely only the first battle in a longer war for the land and water that sustained them all. But as Heath watched Fawn moving confidently among their neighbors, her intelligence and passion evident in every gesture, he felt certain of one thing. Whatever challenges came, they would face them together, not because of a childhood promise or a sense of obligation, but because they had chosen each other, fully aware of all they were and all they might become. And in the untamed Arizona territory of 1885, perhaps that was the greatest victory of all.